we're account managers, both Dan and myself, and we work with our clients typically at the end of the year to start looking forward to the next either fiscal or calendar year for their project initiatives. And so in that process, what we'll typically do is we'll sit down and we'll look at what initiatives they have. Really what sort of starts the conversation is looking at their current infrastructure. So their infrastructure will consist of hardware like servers, switches, firewalls, really everything that sort of runs the organization's network and IT environment, right? And in that vein, what we typically look at is the age of the infrastructure, because that's really a red herring with regards to what you would need to do to plan for the next steps of the organization. So in general, most hardware has kind of a lifespan around the 5-year mark. That's generally the for network and server equipment. And that really comes back to to power supplies and moving pieces. Those parts in those pieces of equipment are the ones that tend to fail at that age, right? And so when we purchase new equipment, we usually get them with a 3-year support and warranty contract. And that 3-year mark is a great time to pause and look to see what the organization has plans to do in the future. So typically what we look at is we'll purchase a piece of equipment, have a 3-year warranty and support contract applied to it. And then when that 3-year mark comes around, we'll sit down and say, okay, is this hardware sized appropriately for your organization? Does it serve the purposes of your company? And if it does, typically we'll extend out the support contract for another year or two. But really beyond that 5-year mark is when we really look to replace that or really understand if that is the right solution for the next 3 to 5 years. Because when you're purchasing equipment, you're really purchasing it for the future, and you're trying to base your sizing and the resources of that equipment for the next 3 to 5 years. And it could very well be that you have a server that's 5 years old, it's getting aged out, you need to replace it. At that point, you sit down and you're like, okay, well, do we want to get a new server? Does that make sense to the organization? Do we want to replace it like for like? Do we want to move to the cloud? A lot of organizations have started that process, and if not already in the cloud, and maybe this piece of equipment that you have doesn't make sense for your organization. So a lot of these sort of questions start coming up as we're starting to look towards replacing or refreshing a lot of that infrastructure.
Yeah. And so Dan, on your side, do you see that the hardware lifecycle management is the driver of the technology methodology for an organization?
So I'd say partially. When I go into these meetings, I'm really thinking of 3 things. I'm trying to, by looking at what's in place and then planning out the future, you want to ensure operations are smooth so people have equipment that works. You want to make sure that the current threat landscape and potential threat landscape in the future, that you have good security posturing against all of that. And then third, what I want to look at is I want to be able to give the client a predictable budget so they have a successful financial year the following year where they can budget most of their IT spend. So I'm trying to do those 3 things. So really, those are the things that I'm trying to address in ours, and Patrick does too. We do it in the same way. But that's really the main drivers. I want to attack those 3 things, and really everything else kind of falls into place once I consider those things. So from a hardware replacement standpoint, I'm trying to predict future spend. I want to make sure operations are smooth so people can work. And I want to make sure people are secure. And
those become collaborative conversations with customers in our kind of virtual CIO roles, where it's like, where is the organization going? And does the current hardware get you there? Does the current infrastructure get you there? Patrick brought up a great point of, as more workloads move to the cloud, the hardware budget can change. That the life cycle of equipment purchase, which I thought it was really good, Patrick, that you said, we're buying hardware for the future use.
Right.
When we buy net new, we're buying for the future. We're kind of looking out because we don't want that spend to be wasted. So I can see how all of that ties together in looking at both hardware lifecycle management, where the applications are going as far as what business line applications run the company. Because one of the things that I've noticed over the last few years is every company is a technology company now, whether they like it or not. They may make widgets or they may install insulation, but it still all runs on technology. Yeah. And so that's just such a core piece of the business. And we learned through the pandemic that you live and die by the technology you have in place.
Yeah.
So it's critically important.
And what we've seen, there's just been this big shift over the last 10 years, where 10 years ago, your big IT spend was in infrastructure and the servers and stuff you would buy. And what we've seen over the last 10 years, and especially the last 2 years, is that spend still happening, but it's shifted. So it's shifted to your network layer and keeping your network up and your internet services up and being very resilient and secure. And also the cloud-based application layer. So the spend is just kind of shifted. So we've had to focus as IT professionals over the last X number of years to say, okay, how does IT work now in the cloud? How do you keep it secure? How do you keep people productive? How do you keep your environments up? As opposed to, how do we keep these servers up? How do we keep these servers backed up? How do we keep them secure? Just kind of change the focus. And that's something that we talk about annually with our clients is, looking out in the future, how can we eliminate the need for on-prem infrastructure if it's appropriate? And how can we move you into more cloud-based infrastructure that's more resilient and possibly more secure? So that's something we talk about all the time.